October 24th is Municipal Election Day in Ontario. But between fears about lower voter turnout and now a string of veteran politicians opting not to run for re-election, is it time to worry about the state of local democracy? Let's ask. In Mono, Ontario, Ellen Sinclair. She's Executive Director of the Rural Ontario Institute. And here in the provincial capital, Meyer Semiatycki, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Politics and Public Administration at Toronto Metropolitan University, and political commentator and consultant Seher Shafik. And it's great to have you three on our program tonight. Seher, I'll put you to work right away. You know, we've seen already on the program tonight talking about the fact that many councillors, mayors, trustees, and so on are opting for an exit from public life. The city council in the capital city of the province is losing almost a third of its members. I can't remember the last time that happened. What do you think's going on here?
I think there's a few things that are going on. The pandemic definitely has torn apart the very basic fabric of our society. And when you think about what it takes to run for office, you need to be able to tap into your networks to fundraise, to ask for volunteers, even to get votes. And so we're emerging from 2 years of complete disconnection from our communities. And we also know that community engagement precedes formal political engagement. So that could be one factor. There's also been a documented rise in polarization and what you would call toxicity in our political sphere. There's been rocks being thrown at the Prime Minister. There's been death threats for some candidates and sitting councillors as well. And I think that can turn a lot of people off. And it's important to recognize that this is happening. And then lastly, one thing that could be a factor is the increased workload specifically for Toronto City councillors. So a lot of the people that have decided not to continue as city councillors have cited family reasons and work-life balance. And cutting council to 25 seats increased the size of the ward, which increased the services that need to be provided to a larger population, and that increases workload. So that could be another reason why we're seeing less people run for city council.
Let me pick up on that last point. Meyer, I saw you nodding your head at that. You know, it's a reference, of course, to Doug Ford. One of the first things he did as Premier was almost cut Toronto City Council in half. What impact do you think that's had on the fact that so many are now not running for re-election?
I think Seher has nailed it. I think the downsizing of Toronto City Council has had a very negative impact on the fabric of local democracy in Toronto. I'm sure in the course of the conversation we'll make clear this isn't just a Toronto phenomenon. It's going on across the province, these warning signs about diminishing democracy. But the downsizing of council from 47 to 25 had a number of very negative consequences. As Seher has said, the workload increased dramatically. The ability of local councillors to connect with their residents, to connect with grassroots, has been majorly impeded. They've just got way too many, too large a population to represent. And a number of the councillors have said, I got into this to connect with my local communities at street level, neighborhood level, and I can't do that anymore. The other factor not to be lost here is the cost of running for local elected position in a city like Toronto. In the last election, 2018, the mayor spent over $2.5 million. Councillors typically spent upwards of $100,000. And that's a chunk of change to have to mobilize and be personally on the line for. There's no political party backing you up at the local level. So I'd say it's had a very negative consequence.
Ellen, let's get the sense from rural Ontario, because you certainly don't hear the story in rural Ontario that our constituencies have gone from, say, 50,000 to 120,000, which was the case at Toronto City Hall. So what would the explanation be there?
So I go back to Seher's first comment, and that is that I think the pandemic is probably the biggest influence on local politicians' decisions not to run again. You know, they went into office in 2018, and the pandemic was nowhere on the horizon. No one expected anything like the decisions that local councillors were going to have to make, closing municipal services, closing town halls, possibly laying off staff, making decisions around vaccine mandates, mask mandates, controversial decisions that were, not expected, and frankly exhausting. So these are small rural councils making, big decisions for their communities, and just, frankly, tired of sort of facing public scrutiny, which was really heightened during the pandemic. Just exhausted.
Let me follow up on that angle, Ellen, because I take your point that some of the decisions they had to make were clearly not on the horizon and decisions they didn't expect to have to make thanks to COVID-19. But tell me more about the blowback. What kinds of things would, municipal officials in villages of 500 to 1,500 people, what kinds of things would they be hearing from constituents that under normal circumstances they never would have heard?
A lot of the same issues that the urban centers councillors are hearing, except that in rural towns and smaller communities, they're much more accessible. So councillors are walking down our main streets and we know them. We meet them in the grocery stores. Arguably, these smaller councils, smaller municipalities, sort of face that visibility that larger centers don't. So that's a sort of immediate access to councillors in small towns that I think was, the blowback wasn't, I don't think, any different. It was just the accessibility of rural councillors that may be a factor at play.
Meier, could you speak to the issue of respect? Because, this may or may not be true, but you often hear it, that the federal government, that level, tends to get the most respect, then provincial, then municipal. Municipal government is often seen as sort of the poor second cousin we keep in the corner. Do you think that's part of what's going on here?
No, actually, I don't. Well, yes and no. I'd say from the vantage point of the public, I think the public has a high regard for the services and quality of life that is determined by their local government. We regularly do a public opinion sampling of the Canadian public's perception of the services they get from government. And inevitably, the runaway top service regarded by the public is the fire department. Now, that, of course, is a municipal service. And it may well be that the fire department hasn't come to our homes, one hopes, for a long time, if ever, but one's able to sleep at night knowing that there is a fire department. And similarly, if you look across the level of responsibilities of local government, I think the public recognizes that from transportation to libraries to parks to water, et cetera, that the decisions coming out of local government and planning and land use, of course, are really, really important at the local level. So I don't think it's an issue of whether people think it's important enough. I think the couple of challenges that municipalities face is, one is a problem of understanding how local government operates and works. It's a different kind of political arena than the parliamentary, federal, and provincial system. There are agencies, boards, and commissions all over the place that can confuse the public. Elections that I imagine we'll get to in a moment are really hard to figure out at the local level. And then maybe a last point I'd make is the respect problem is coming from provincial governments. I don't want to single out only Ontario. This is a nationwide problematic that from our constitution of over 150 years ago, we are saddled with a set of rules that make municipalities completely dependent on their provincial governments. And in recent years, provinces have really been bigfooting municipalities, just really interfering with both the decisions that local councils make and how they go about making those decisions. And that needs to end if we're ever going to have a semblance of local democracy.
Well, let me pursue that with Seher, because it was less than a month ago that the Association of Municipalities of Ontario held its annual meeting for the first time in a few years in public, and everybody was very happy to be there and rubbing shoulders with each other again. The Premier showed up. Every cabinet minister showed up. It certainly conveyed, Seher, the impression that the provincial government cared a lot and respected the local level enough to want to come out in force. And of course, the opposition leaders were there as well to make speeches and rub shoulders as well. So talk to us about respect and the issue of whether you think a lack of respect from the province to the local municipality is really a thing.
I would say that actions speak loudest here. And while there was a lot of attendance at this forum, I think the decision to cut Toronto City Council in half is the fourth largest city in North America. That's to have 25 councillors representing the fourth largest city of North America it's a big decision. And to me, it indicates a lack of respect, to be very frank.
Ellen, what's your view on that issue of respect?
Yeah, I have to say that of the three levels of government, municipal government is probably I don't know if respect is the best term, but from the voters' point of view, I think, again, I go back to that issue of accessibility. We're on a par with our councillors, as opposed to our MPPs and our MPs. We can call our councillors up on their cell phone. So from that perspective, we're a little more familiar with our municipal government. But from the top-down perspective, so Meyer alluded to provincial sort of oversight and provincial overriding of municipal decisions. So councillors are at the table making development decisions or municipal decisions that they think are sound, and they get overridden by provincial ministry zoning orders and things like that. So, I think from both ends of the spectrum, municipal government is just a little lower on the totem pole.
Well, Meyer, okay, let me pursue that a little bit. I've talked to lots of local politicians over the years, and I must confess, I can't recall one who's ever said to me, you know what, Steve, I'm not running again because those damn fellows down at Queen's Park are always overruling our decisions. That's never come up. You really think this is a thing?
Yeah, I think the tide has turned. We've several things. Ellen has mentioned ministerial zoning orders, which the province has embarked on to, as it wishes, overturn specific zoning and planning decisions. So that's a whole new trajectory and initiative. It's interesting, you mentioned, Steve, the provincial government's appearance at the AMO's convention. More recently, AMO, of course, has come out opposed to the immediate implementation of the strong mayors legislation of the provincial government, saying that it needs more consultation with local councils, it needs more consultation with local stakeholders. So I think we're in a new environment where municipalities are feeling more and more put upon by the province, and that there's no question that becomes a source of frustration, of disappointment. And we've now come through 2 provincial elections where no mention was made during the campaign of major changes in the works to local government operations, referring 4 years ago to the decision to downsize council in Toronto, now the decision across Ontario to really to purportedly strengthen the hand of mayors by marginalizing and minimizing the role of councillors. You take that all together, and if you're sitting on council, you may well be thinking, what's the point?
Now, that's a very fair point. Sahar, let me get you on that, because certainly Doug Ford did not campaign on the so-called Strong Mayor Act that he's about to that the legislature has passed. And I guess one of the immediate reactions was the mayor of Ottawa said, I don't like this, and I never asked for this. And a lot of the other mayors who were not included in this, because this was only meant for the Toronto and Ottawa mayoralties, a lot of other municipalities said, hey, how come only them and why not me? So maybe can you pick up that baton and run with it there on whether or not this Strong Mayor's Power Act has caused more problems than it's purported to solve?
I really struggle with this rhetoric around strong mayors, and I actually think that the act was named in a bit of a misleading way. It references building homes, and the act, in fact, is not just about building homes. It's about control that mayors have over budgets, over a bunch of different things, including appointing chairs to various committees. And I think the decision to name it about building homes was a political decision on the part of the provincial government. On the issue of is a strong mayor's system good for local democracy? I think it needs the act as it is needs some checks and balances. Does the mayor really need to be have the ability to choose the chairs of various committees? Probably not. I mean, you can debate that as much as we like, but the fact is that Toronto is the fourth largest city in North America, and until now, we haven't had much control over our budgets. I remember back in 2017, Mayor John Tory wanted to impose tolls on the Gardiner and the DVP as a form of revenue that was very much needed for the city. And whether or not you agree with that policy or not, the fact is it would have brought in a lot of revenue and impacted the city's budget significantly. And at that time, Premier Kathleen Wynne shot down that idea, and it was never to be seen again. So I think that, we can talk about strong mayors, but there is a broader conversation here to be had about strong cities and what powers over our budgets a city like Toronto should be having, given how complex the residents' needs are, how many public policy issues are so pressing, and the impact that a budget in a city of Toronto can have. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are some of the things that I think about when I read about the Strong Mayors Act.
Gotcha. Ellen, I wonder if I could put this to you, and in doing so, I'm hoping that I'm not going to sound completely naive and ridiculous here in doing it, but let's just, for argument's sake, say that there's an argument to be made that maybe there is so much less interest in the municipal level of government. We know turnout is much less in municipal elections than it is for provincial or federal elections, and that's really saying something given how low the turnout is there lately. Do you think it's possible that more people are not actively engaged in municipal politics and so many fewer seem to be interested in running because there's contentment? People are essentially content with the way things are going, and therefore they don't feel they need to engage that much more.
Absolutely. You see a lot more engagement in regions, communities, areas that have issues. So when we have acclamations across, different communities, that can often be because, the current slate of candidates or mayor is doing a good job. People are satisfied with what's transpiring in their community. I don't think that is a sort of a common theme across Ontario. I think things bubble up all the time in different communities, in different areas. And so you start to see a little more engagement, a little more activity among the voting electorate, the voting public. Yeah.
Well, Myron, let me get you on that because, okay, maybe 30 people are running for mayor of Toronto, but there are lots of smaller municipalities around this province where incumbent mayors are being acclaimed. Nobody's running against them. What do you think that signals?
Well, I think it signals a disconnect of local populations from their local elected government. I think it takes me back to Sahir's opening comment about a general sort of public state at this stage of the pandemic of people having been isolated, having been really sort of self-enclosed and cut off from communal and organizational involvement. So I think that's a big piece of it. But I would not say that acclamations, and it's true, like just to give a sense of the scale of this, 15 municipalities near Ottawa are acclaiming their mayor. Some of those acclamations are people who are the only candidate who stepped up to throw their hat into the ring when an incumbent mayor did not run for re-election. So, that kind of tells you, like, this isn't a vote of confidence, it's a vote of distancing and a degree of alienation from political institutions and local government. We haven't talked much about school boards. In the last 2018 election, colleagues and I did a study of school board elections. 1/3 of all trustees in Ontario were acclaimed. I'm sure many of them did wonderful, responsive jobs on behalf of their residents, but did all of them? I doubt it. It's a warning sign about about a lack of connectedness, a lack of engagement that really should set off alarm bells about the well-being of local democracy.
In which case, Sahir, in our last minute here, let me pick up on that word alienation that Meyer just used. If we want people to be less alienated from their municipal governments, give us an idea or two of how they can help make that happen.
I think being involved in local community work, the academic literature shows that being involved in communities precedes formal political engagement. So any ways to get involved with the neighborhood or interactions with local city councilors or candidates, ideally those candidates are coming to communities and really engaging with those communities where they're at. I think that could make a really big difference, not just during election cycles, but also in the 4 years in between.
Ellen, last 30 seconds to you, same question.
Yes, get on local boards, get on not-for-profit boards. They rarely turn people away, and it's a great training ground for process, understanding procedure, process, understanding the political process.
Gotcha. Thanks for your wisdom, you three. Ellen Sinclair, Sahir Shafiq, Meyer Simiatycki. Great to have you all on TVO tonight. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.